The Denver Broncos are making big moves to reshape their roster and create salary cap space before free agency begins. And fans, this could be a game changer. With the new league year kicking off on March 12th and the legal tampering period starting on March 10th, the Broncos are setting themselves up to make some bold, potentially franchise-altering moves in the AFC. Before we dive into the details, if you've been a Broncos fan for over 20 years, hit that like button. It's amazing to see fans of all ages here. Some of you may have even been there for the very first game. Drop a comment if you were. And if you're a true Broncos fan, let's have some fun. Comment, "The Miami Dolphins live in my heart." Now, let's talk about the numbers. The Broncos currently rank 16th in salary cap space, giving them decent flexibility. But they're not stopping there. With the right moves, they could free up an additional $50 million, putting them in a strong position to sign key impact players. A huge advantage for Denver is ownership. The Broncos have the richest owners in the NFL, wealthier than the second, third, and fourth richest combined. That financial power gives them an edge when it comes to aggressive spending. And with head coach Sean Payton at the helm, we know he's no stranger to creative salary cap moves. During his time with the Saints, he consistently pushed the limits to build a competitive team. The key to creating more cap space lies in making smart contract decisions. Right now, the Broncos are considering three major moves, and first up is safety P.J. Locke. Locke signed a 2-year deal, but he didn't deliver the impact the team expected. While he wasn't a major weakness, he also wasn't the physical, downhill enforcer that Kareem Jackson was. Denver needs more from its safeties, and cutting ties with Locke would free up about $4 million in cap space. And that's just the beginning. There's a lot more to unpack as the Broncos prepare for a major roster overhaul. It may not seem like a huge amount, but every dollar counts, especially when you consider what the Broncos could do with that extra cap space. For example, they could bring in a solid depth player like Zach Bond, who made a real impact on special teams during his time in New Orleans. Next up is tight end Adam Trautman. Let's be honest, the Broncos' tight end room needs a serious upgrade, and Trautman just hasn't lived up to expectations. He signed a 2-year deal last offseason, but his production has been disappointing. If Denver is serious about revamping this position, they might look to the draft, targeting a young talent like Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland. If that's the case, moving on from Trautman makes a lot of sense. Cutting or trading him wouldn't just free up $3 million in cap space. It would also create room for a more dynamic pass-catching weapon. But the biggest potential move? Parting ways with offensive lineman Ben Powers. 2 off-seasons ago, Powers signed a 4-year, $50+ million contract, but his performance hasn't justified the price tag. While the offensive line did a solid job protecting Bo Nix, they struggled to open up running lanes, and Powers in particular hasn't delivered at the level Denver expected. For what he's being paid, he might be the worst value among the Broncos' starting linemen. If Denver cuts him after June 1st, they can spread his dead money over 2 seasons, just like they did with Russell Wilson, and save a massive $12 million. That's the kind of move that could create serious opportunities in free agency. Altogether, these 3 roster moves could clear up a whole total of $19.2 million in additional cap space. That's a big chunk of money Denver could use to strengthen key positions, whether it's bringing in a veteran wide receiver, an impact linebacker, or more protection by Bo Nix. Speaking of wide receivers, there's been some buzz around Deebo Samuel. The 49ers star recently appeared on a Bleacher Report podcast and had some interesting things to say about Denver. He mentioned that he loves how Bo Nix is playing and sees the Broncos as a team that's close to making some noise. Now, this doesn't mean Denver is officially targeting Samuel, but if the 49ers decide to release him, which is a real possibility, he could become a major option for the Broncos. If the Broncos manage to clear cap space with these roster moves, suddenly signing Deebo Samuel doesn't seem so far-fetched, and that's just one possibility. Beyond that, Denver also has an advantage when it comes to rookie contracts. First and second round draft picks come with set salary structures, so the Broncos already know exactly how much they need to budget for their draft class. That means every extra dollar they free up can be fully dedicated to improving the roster in free agency. But before we wrap this up, let's not overlook an important coaching staff change. The Broncos recently hired Darren Rizzi, the former special teams coordinator for the Saints. This might seem like a small move, but it could have a big impact. Rizzi has a reputation for getting the most out of his special teams units, and he could push Denver to bring in a player like Zach Bond, who already played under him in New Orleans. So, Broncos fans, what do you think? Are these the right moves to free up cap space? Should Denver be aggressive in free agency, or should they focus more on building through the draft? And if Deebo Samuel actually becomes available, should the Broncos go all in to sign him? Let me know in the comments. And as always, stay tuned right here for all the latest Broncos updates. Now, let's take this a step further. If Denver successfully clears this additional cap space, what should they do with it? Head coach Sean Payton and general manager George Payton have some huge decisions ahead, and what they do this offseason could shape the team's future for years to come. One of the biggest priorities? Finding more playmakers for Bo Nix. Whether or not you believe Nix is the long-term answer at quarterback, the Broncos have committed to developing him. That means they need to build the right supporting cast around him. Right now, the wide receiver room is full of question marks. Courtland Sutton has been a solid performer, but there have been trade rumors swirling around him for months. Meanwhile, Jerry Jeudy has shown flashes of talent but hasn't fully lived up to his first-round potential. If Denver wants to take the next step, upgrading at receiver might be one of the most important moves they make. If the Broncos want to get the most out of all Bo Nix's development, they need to surround him with a true game-changing wide receiver. That's where someone like Deebo Samuel or another top-tier pass catcher could make a huge difference. Samuel's ability to contribute both as a receiver and a weapon in the run game would fit perfectly in Sean Payton's offensive system. If Denver decides to move on from Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, it will leave a major hole at wide receiver, and the team must be proactive in filling that gap. Whether through a trade, free agency, or the draft, upgrading this position should be a top priority this offseason. But wide receiver isn't the only area that needs attention. Our offensive line is another major concern. As mentioned earlier, if Denver moves on from Ben Powers, they will clear a large chunk of cap space, but that also creates a hole that must be filled. The Broncos can't afford to weaken their pass protection, so if Powers is cut, expect them to target a veteran guard in free agency. Possible options include Robert Hunt or Kevin Zeitler, depending on how aggressive they want to be in the market. On the defensive side of the ball, linebacker and safety are two key positions where Denver needs help. If P.J. Locks is let go, the Broncos will have to add depth at safety. Meanwhile, linebacker remains a position of need. A name to watch is Zach Bond, who has ties to special teams coordinator Darren Rizzi from their time in New Orleans. While Bond has mainly been a special teams standout, he has shown potential when given defensive snaps. If Payton and Rizzi believe in his upside, he could be a sneaky good addition who brings versatility to the defense. And let's not forget about the defensive line. While the Broncos have been solid up front, they need another impact pass rusher to take pressure off the secondary. There are some intriguing free agent options, and if Denver creates enough cap space, they could make a splash signing here. Finally, there's the NFL draft, which is another crucial factor in shaping the team's future. The Broncos hold both a first-round and second-round pick, and how they use those selections will play a huge role in building the next phase of this roster. If the Broncos decide to go after a tight end like Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, it could make Adam Trautman less valuable, as we discussed earlier. But what about the quarterback position? While Bo Nix is currently the guy, there's still a chance Denver might look to draft a young quarterback in the mid to late rounds to build for the future. The bottom line is this: Denver has a lot of options and is in a strong position to be aggressive this offseason. Unlike some teams struggling with cap space, the Broncos aren't in a desperate situation, but they also can't afford to just sit back and do nothing. If they make the right moves, they could free up a lot of cap space while also strengthening the roster in key areas. Now, it's your turn, Broncos country. What do you think about potentially moving on from PJ Locke, Adam Troutman, and Ben Powers to open up cap space? Who do you think Denver should target in free agency? And if Deebo Samuel becomes available, should the Broncos go after him? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, stay tuned for the latest updates, news, and analysis on the Broncos.